Hey, everybody, this is John Halpin. Welcome to HMH's Future of Transportation podcast. On this show, we host a regular series of chats with experts in the transportation industry. And joining me today is Patrick Goddard, president of Brightline. Patrick, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks, John. Great to be here.
So Brightline, I'm going to read from their website, aims to redefine travel in America by taking cars off the road and offering millions of travelers an eco-friendly way to move between the nation's most visited city pairs. Okay, so city pairs is an interesting way to put this. Can you talk about what that means?
Yeah. So obviously there's a whole variety of options when it comes to train travel across the US and the world. We are singularly focused on connecting cities that are too far to drive and too long to fly. So what we look at are corridors that are between 200 and 400 miles apart, right? Very densely populated cities that are connected by congested highways. So we look at those pairs, right? We think of those as a pair. So Miami to Orlando, Charlotte to Atlanta, LA to Vegas, Dallas to Houston. Those are all city pairs that are, fall into that category of too short to fly, too long to drive.
Okay. So when you do that, it makes perfect sense, right? I was actually, and I was going to mention later, I was on a trip last week, was on a family vacation, and I was in Southern California, and the rental car prices were really expensive. And I said, why don't we take the train between San Diego and Orange County? And I kind of thought of you guys when I did it. And it's not a common thing for people in this country to take the train. And it makes sense. It took me 90 minutes, and I said, wow, I didn't have to get a car, I didn't have to drive, so it was less effort. I didn't have to fly. It was great. Changing people's behavior in that manner has got to be really hard. How do you guys want to do that?
Yeah, that's, it's an interesting story, John, because that's what it takes. It takes that initial experience doing it. And let me ask you, after you did it, would you travel by train again?
Yes, it was easy. I mean, I will say that this particular experience, it was Amtrak's Pacific Surfliner. It went along the Pacific Ocean, so it was a phenomenal view. But yes, we were staying downtown, so we walked to the train station in San Diego. We hopped on it. We got to within 3 miles of where we wanted to be. So it was a much less, I didn't have to go park at the airport, and I didn't have to drive, which was great. So I really liked it. I guess the part of it is, I'll give you a personal example. And I know you're not a commuter train, so it's a little different, but I live in a suburb of Charlotte where I'm a New Yorker, by birth, and I grew up there. So it was easy for me to take public transportation and take trains. I was used to trains. Here, it's hard to get to them. And I imagine that getting to the train station, if it's 15 minutes away, it's great. If it's 45 minutes, maybe not so much. That's
right. Yeah, I mean, location of the train station is a really important component, because really what you want to be doing is downtown to downtown. The most successful intercity transportation system in this country is the Acela service in the Northeast, where you can get from downtown Manhattan to downtown DC or Philly or Boston, without ever needing to drive to the Beltway or drive from the Beltway to get to the transportation system. So what I would say is, there is a stigma. I mean, if you think about the history of train travel in the United States, we were all about trains until about the 60s. Really the 50s. So after the Second World War, while Europe and Asia were rebuilding all of their train systems and improving them and making them into high-speed systems, the U.S. pretty much abandoned train travel and invested billions of dollars as a result of the Federal Highway Act, because they believe that, everybody's going to want this independence. They're going to want to have a car. So, now 70 years later, all those highways are congested. Right. Average speeds are 20, 30 miles an hour on most of them. So we're now realizing that we need options. We need different alternative ways to get between, cities, because, you now have two extremes. You've got air travel and you've got car travel. So we believe that, and again, just to delve into the history and to give you a little bit of the landscape in the United States, we probably have the best freight rail network on the planet. But we have, we have an embarrassing passenger rail network as it relates to Asia and Europe for now. So we do need to change that, and there's a lot of dialogue about that from Congress to private companies, about changing that. I think everybody understands that people need lots of mobility options. It's not a one size fits all. It's an ecosystem, and people have different means. So we really need to consider all of the alternatives, and train travel is being a viable alternative everywhere else in the world for the last 5 decades. It just really hasn't existed here until we showed up a few years ago.
So you talked about investment in other countries in trains, but that's government investment generally, right?
Not necessarily. So,
Okay.
not necessarily. So what typically happens, for example, in the EU or in Asia, and definitely in Asia, it's more government investment. But in Europe, what are more common are where the government builds the infrastructure and then leases it out to a concession. So, Eurostar, that's a concessionaire. Italo in Italy, that's a concessionaire. Renfe's a concessionaire. So we're unique. Brightline's unique in that we own the infrastructure and we are the operator. That's a pretty unique model. And as we think about deploying a system like this and having an actual high-speed rail network in the United States, it'll be a composition of a variety of different models, whether they're government run, like the Pacific Surfliner that you were on a few weeks ago, or they're totally private, are there somewhere in between? There are some corridors that from an economic perspective, it's going to be very difficult to get them to pencil if the operator needs to make all of the capital investment.
Right.
So in those cases, what we've discussed with, and presented to Congress is we can help Congress's money go further, and we can alleviate government of the operating subsidies, and make money as a result. So there's really a lot of different spaces in which the government and private operators like ourselves can play. And there's lots of different models to draw from all over the world. But in our initial 2 projects, we've got 2 projects that we believe will be very highly profitable. And as a result, we're prepared to invest the significant capital necessary to make those 2 happen. But that may not be the case for every, city pair.
Okay. So talking about what you're working on. So the first one that you're actually working on is in Miami to Orlando route. So how's that going? You referencing what you just talked about, the working together with government and helping their money go further. I know this, that's not federal, it's statewide, but how's that going in that way?
Yeah, so, there's different aspects to this, right? So the Florida project was really our first project, and it was born on third base. We already owned the freight railroad that connects Miami to Jacksonville. We negotiated with the state to connect that corridor into Orlando, so our corridor runs along the East Coast. We wanted to get to Orlando, which is in the center of the state. So we needed to get from the East Coast to the center of the state. So we negotiated a lease agreement with the state to be able to use a state highway. And we are building new construction on that state highway to connect our existing network that we already owned to Orlando. And where our station is going to be at the Orlando International Airport. So we spent about $2 billion on what we describe as phase 1, which is the first 67 miles between Miami and West Palm Beach. And we're deploying another approximately $2.5 billion of capital to complete those improvements from Palm Beach up to Cocoa, which is where we hang a left to run along the highway into the Orlando airport. So we completed construction on phase 1 at the end of 2017, and we began operating our trains in 2018, just between Miami and West Palm Beach with a stop in Fort Lauderdale. We carried about 1 million people in our first year. And then unfortunately, as a result of COVID, we stopped operating in March of 2020. But we continued construction to Orlando, and we're going to be done with that by the end of next year. So we'll resume operations in South Florida here in the next few months. We will then connect to Orlando a year or so after that. We're opening some additional stations here in South Florida in Aventura and Boca. So we'll become a 6-station system. And we're really excited. I mean, we were, you know, blowing the doors off this thing. I mean, all of these systems take a minute to ramp up.
Yep.
Even the Acela that carries 10, 11 million people a year now, start their first year, they carried like 500,000 people, right? So if you look at Italo, Acela, Renfe, you know, you name it, those first 2, 3 years as you're penetrating the market, you know, that's sort of a normal adoption curve. So we experienced a pretty positive adoption curve relative, you know, in the context of us being the only private operator of intercity passenger rail in a state that loves their car. We were exceptionally pleased with the results in our first year. To be able to get 1 million people off the road, out of their cars and onto our train was a pretty, you know, felt like success to us. And by the time we shut down, we were at a run rate that would have gotten us to double that ridership in our second year. You know, so we were expecting 2 million in our second year, and we would have hit 3 million for the South segment, Miami to West Palm, by year 3. And then, you know, once we opened to Orlando, there are 400 million trips between South Florida and Central Florida. We're only looking to capture 2 or 3% of those. Okay. We're not for everybody. We're not trying to be the solution for every person. We don't have to solve the problem for the family of 6 or the family of 5 or the family of 4. You know, our kind of average group size was, you know, 2 point something. We just believe there's room for alternative modes of travel on these very congested corridors. We're not going to be the solution for everybody, but we'll be the solution for, you know, 3%, 5%, 7%. And that's really all you need to make these things viable.
Okay. So you are, I was reading your bio on the website, and it said you're the first privately owned rail system in the United States in 100 years, right? And we talked about, like I mentioned earlier, you know, that I thought in Europe it was a lot of government funding. I mean, this is a tall order, you know, because this is normally a business where basically if you're not in some places you're a competitor to Amtrak, right? Like, do you go where they are, or do you try to go where they aren't generally? Because I'm guessing in city pairs, I mean, you talked about Acela, and that's, you know, that's pretty entrenched. Like you're probably not going to go to New York to Boston anytime soon, but
unless we take over Acela.
There you go. Do you basically go where they're not?
Not necessarily. We go where there's a need. There is a train you can take from Orlando to the Miami airport. It'll take you about 7 hours. It has about a 45% on-time performance record. They don't have priority on the railroad. And they're, you know, using 20-something-year-old rolling stock. So, you know, if that's the experience you're looking for, you can get it. So, like, we're going to, you know, are we going to compete with them? Like, we don't view them as competition. They carry 50,000 people a year. We carry 50,000 people like a week. So It's just, it's just a different thing. So we will, what we are looking for are corridors, like I said, that are heavily, you know, congested and connect densely populated cities where there's a lot of traffic. Like that's where we're able to be more efficient than going to the airport and more efficient than driving your car. We're going to win every time. And that's like not, you know, our theory. That's just a point of fact. If you look at intercity high-speed rail all over the planet.
Okay. So you used the word experience a minute ago. And so you have a background in the hospitality industry, which I'm sure plays into how you're approaching this. Everybody check out Brightline's website and, you know, some of the photos and things like that. Your experience is more, I don't know if luxurious is the right word, but it's a business class, you know, it reminded me of a business class seat on a plane. Like it's a more upscale experience. Is that that's certainly part of your pitch, right?
100%. I mean, we all live in this experience economy now where, you know, we care about where we care about how we're treated. We care about the environment in which we're in. And, you know, it's no longer sustainable to provide transportation as a commodity per se.
Mm-hmm.
That'll work at the lower end of the market, but as buyers become more sophisticated, their expectations are higher, and it's no different from going to shop at Walmart versus going to shop at Whole Foods or your local farmers market. It's the same concept. So I came from the hotel industry where we took the commodity of accommodation and turned it into an experience. I was mostly focused on 4 and 5 star hotels, independent lifestyle boutique hotels, luxury hotels, where we could command a premium because we delivered a far superior experience. And I'm a big believer in that. I'm a big believer that if you deliver the experience, people are happy to pay for it. And it also differentiates you in a very meaningful way from the alternatives. So we care about interior design. We care about architecture. We care about the people that we bring on board to service our guests. We refer to our customers as guests. We care about food and beverage. We think about the guest experience through all 5 senses: what they see, what they touch, what they feel, what they taste, right? What they hear, what they smell. So it is a holistic experience. Like, the technology has to be amazing. And the end-to-end experience. We have to think about the end-to-end experience. We're not just selling this commodity of an interstitial, train station to train station journey. We're selling really a door-to-door experience. Like, we are increasingly thinking about how do we get you to shift modes in terms of how you travel? How do we get you to do that? And we have to contemplate the entire experience from sitting on your couch to get into the ball game. How do all of those things happen? If I just try and sell a train ticket from Miami to Fort Lauderdale or from Orlando to Palm Beach, we're not going to win the war that way. We'll get some decent ridership, but really what it's about at the end of the day is, like, can we be a viable alternative to you driving your car? Can we be faster, cheaper, and a better experience? And I believe that we can.
So, coming from the hospitality industry, and you're now running a train company, like, what made that happen? That's a huge leap. You must have seen opportunity here, but can you tell me a little bit about, how that transition happened for you?
Yeah. I mean, it goes back to what I said. Selling commodities is no longer, those you're not going to win that way. Unless it's like oil or pork bellies or something, But if it involves another human being, you got to focus on the experience. So, I was as surprised as you would expect when I got a call to explore this opportunity. But it didn't take me very long to understand. And I'd always thought about, the experience economy and its application to other industries, whether that was like a student housing, assisted living facilities, you name it. There are a lot of industries that are going to transition and are transitioning from more commodity businesses to experience businesses. And why not travel and transportation? And certainly, there are certain airlines who do it well. There are certain there are limousine companies and other transportation companies that are out there that do focus on this. But train travel is a perfect environment in which to implement a superior experience, because you've got the station environment, you've got the onboard experience, you've got the digital experience. So the more I learned about what our founder, Wes Edens, was trying to do, the more it resonated with me that we could do something really special with a system like this, and really create an impact and change the way people think about train travel in this country permanently. And we are already raising the bar and starting conversations that would not have occurred but for our existence. And whether that's at the federal level as it relates to their renewed interest in high-speed rail, or whether it's like Amtrak themselves, who are they've just announced that they're going to purchase billions of dollars of rolling stock from the manufacturer that we use for our rolling stock, and they're effectively going to plagiarize our design and everything that we've done, which is that's one of the greatest forms of flattery, right? So
right.
we really do think, and like you can see it, we're changing train travel for the good permanently in this country, and we're just getting started. I mean, we are operating a fraction of what we ultimately hope to operate, and I think that we can probably solve provide other mobility solutions under this broad umbrella that we've created of Brightline.
So you just mentioned I was going to ask you about the potential impact of the infrastructure bill, and you just mentioned one basically that's a very direct impact for you. What other impacts are there for you? I mean, I would imagine that the president being a big fan of rail travel is a good thing overall for you guys, right?
You would think so. It remains to be seen. Government's government, but I think that infrastructure is a phenomenal way to restart an economy. Infrastructure is necessary in order to enable economic movement and activity. And we have a serious deficiency in terms of how much infrastructure exists in this country to move people around. As I articulated a little bit earlier, we are laser focused on our dialogue with the federal government being, let us help you make your dollars go further. Mm-hmm. Let us help you make your dollars go further. We know how to implement. If they spend $80 billion or $1 trillion on infrastructure, or they want to spend $250 billion on high-speed rail in America, like, how long is that going to take for them to implement that through Amtrak? Right. They need other operators. They need implementers. They need, and the private sector, like, I don't care what industry you're looking at, is just generally more efficient about implementing, deploying those dollars and implementing these systems. We built phase 1 in 3 years, which is like lightning, that's like warp speed compared to, how long some of these other things get built. California, I don't want to, these are very hard things to do. So I don't want to be critical of anybody else, and I'm not involved in their day-to-day situations. But, a lot of these projects are costing orders of magnitude more in terms of dollars per mile for construction and duration of the construction period. So we're very proud of the fact that we've been able to, deploy capital really efficiently, get operations stood up. I mean, we are effectively the first to actually start to operate an intercity passenger rail system in the country in over 100 years using private money. The LA to Vegas system will be the only, first and only true high-speed rail system in the country at, traveling at speeds of 200 miles an hour. Like, it doesn't exist. Like, we are, the pioneers here, and we're actually making it happen. We're deploying capital, or we're selling tickets, right? We'll be selling tickets here in a few weeks. Right. I said weeks, I meant months. That's for all of our regulars who are dying for us to get back. They're going to jump all over that if they hear this and be like, clicking on the website. So there's a tremendous opportunity right now that we hope the federal government, we hope they share our vision for how 1 + 1 can equal to like 3 or 5 here. But it remains to be seen. We've had one bill come out that, wasn't terribly meaningful for us. There's more bills that are out there that are, have the potential of getting advanced that I think could benefit us. So we'll see where it all shakes out. But, they certainly are saying the right things. It's a matter of whether they'll do them or not.
Okay. You guys are also, in addition to pioneering in high-speed rail, which a lot of people talk about doing, and you're actually, shovels in the ground, I guess is for lack of a better term. You're pretty green focused. I mean, clean biodiesel fuel for lower emissions, solar power for your stations, EV charging options in your parking lots. I think that I would imagine any company at this point that's making an investment in transportation needs to do that. Is it cost effective in the short term? I mean, it's an investment for sure. Does it cost more money to operate that way?
No. In fact, in many ways, it's like far more efficient. And there's other returns that are difficult to identify kind of when you're sitting down with your investment committee and trying to get these things like, green lighted. But the the focus of our community, our target guests, our target customers, ESG is just heightened in everyone's sensibilities right now. You were all seeing the promulgation of e-bikes and electric cars, and people putting solar panels on their roofs, and people want this. And if we're going to spend billions on creating these significant infrastructure assets, making sure that we're leveraging the best technology and building materials and methodologies to ensure that we're doing things in a sustainable way, is not a significant additional investment. It's like in the scheme of things, it's a rounding error, right? It's so from an investment perspective, it makes all the sense in the world to spend the additional money so that we're building something that is going to be for the ages, that's sustainable. Even the fact that we've got biodiesel on these trains in Florida, we'd love to move to hydrogen ultimately here, or battery power ultimately here. LA to Vegas will be a completely electric system, and we'll be generating our own power for that. From predominantly from solar. So, okay. We can, so it's, and technology's gotten so good now, and all of that technology was very expensive, and it's just becoming less expensive, more affordable, more approachable, easier to implement. So I feel like we have a responsibility as we make these significant infrastructure investments to ensure that we do so in an environmentally responsible way.
Okay. What's the LA to Vegas status, by the way?
We'll be permitted by the end of the year. We'll be raising money in that time frame or early spring as well. It's about a 3.5-year build.
Okay. And how much is that going to cut the travel to? Because it's a 3-hour from downtown LA to Vegas?
Well, yeah. So we've got some options, similar to South Florida. Mm-hmm. We're going to be in LA. We'll be sort of picking people up along the way, if you will. Yep, right. From Union Station to Victorville, if you will, or El Monte, or so you'll be picking people up along the way. But once you sort of get to the LA basin, you're talking about like 90 minutes from from there to the Strip. So you'll on a Friday evening, you'll probably have like 3 trains pass you, on your drive across I-15.
Nice. I'm a casino guy, so that sounds like a really great option.
Yeah, and I mean, psychologically, John, just think about if you've been to Vegas from the West, from LA, and you're sitting there on Sunday morning thinking about driving back, right? Imagine you no longer need to worry about what time you leave. You don't need to, worry about what condition you're in, frankly, right? Which is more important for some than others. You can literally say, and it's predictable, and there's a train every hour, right? So, okay, I'm going to get on I'm going to enjoy the Sunday pool party, and like in 90 minutes to 2 hours, I'm home. I think it totally changes, people's Las Vegas experience, and the preponderance of Vegas customers, particularly the regulars. Like if you went to Caesars and asked them to show you a heat map of their top customers, they'd all be living in the LA basin. They'd all be living in that basin. So I think it completely changes that dynamic for people. And then I think there are other offshoot, benefits for folks too. So we're super excited about that. It's really a really intuitive corridor. There are about 60 million trips on that every year. Again, we're just going to provide another mode, and we think we'll shift, 10-15% of those people to the train and induce new demand for people who never wanted to do that drive or did it once and are never going to do it again.
Absolutely. All right. That sounds great. Last question for you. So the reason we wanted to talk to you was because in the transportation industry, I mean, you appeared, your company's a game changer. What other companies do you see, whether it's a mode of transportation, it's a technology, what other companies, and I always tell people, you can't say Tesla. What companies do you see as game changers that maybe people don't think about?
I'm coming off a conversation this morning where we were just talking about the micromobility landscape and mobility as a service. And, if you look at the number of players that have entered that market in the last, just not like 10 years or 5 years, but like 2 years, everything from, electric helicopters to scooters to, you name it. And then, so difficult to call out an individual operator or business or brand per se, because, a lot of them are doing the same things. Mm-hmm. I just think it's going to be fascinating to see who emerges at the top there, because these things ultimately end up getting consolidated, right? And whether or not like the Googles, Amazons, Facebooks, et cetera, are ever going to get into this space, this mobility space, right? Like it's going to just be an interesting thing to watch. But like if you're not informed, and I'm sure there's a lot of data out there now, and there's micromobility websites and newsletters, and there's things that you can read up on. It's just become this huge landscape, and technology is so you have all of these new alternatives, whether it's like Lilium with their helicopters, and it's Lime and all these other folks with the scooters and e-bikes. I mean, if you see the trajectory of e-bike sales in Europe over the last 12 months, mm-hmm. It's shocking. So the whole landscape is changing in terms of the actual logistics themselves. Now, overlay technology on top of all of those alternatives, and technology is enabling multimodal travel so that you have this real alternative to a car. Like train travel was so challenging in the past, even in countries where it's very developed. Because of the first and last mile friction. Yeah. People, if you're sitting on your couch and you need to get to the ball game and you're thinking about, will I take the train or the car? I got to figure out, well, what time do I need to leave the house to get to the station? Do I need to park my car? How much does that cost? Then I got to get a ticket. Then when I get to the other end, how do I get to the ballpark? And, if I call an Uber, will there be one available and all the rest of it? So technology is now eliminating all of that friction. Because with all of those decisions and all of that friction, a lot of people just put their hands in their pocket, grabbed their car keys, and got into their car that was sitting in their front drive. Now, granted, the friction for that experience was more on the back end when you get stuck in traffic and can't find parking, or you don't want to drive home at the end of whatever event you've gone to, but you don't think about that, right? What technology is enabling, and with all of these different modes of travel, is all that friction now goes away, because now I can travel on, imagine having a multimodal experience that looks and feels like an Uber ride, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm able to basically, this is where I want to go. These are my preferred modes of travel based on either travel time, comfort, or affordability. And, I click the go button and somebody comes and picks me up within, blankety blank minutes. Yeah. Right. And I'm able to track my journey. I'm ticketed for the whole thing. I've paid for the whole thing. Right. So that mobility as a service notion, I think that's going to be the game changer. And the companies who are doing that right now, whether it's there's a company called IOMOB, there's a company called, there are a lot of countries who are already implementing these at a sort of, at a government level, at an agency level. They're enabling, technology to provide their residents, their citizens, with all of these different modal alternatives, and facilitating that through technology. And people are able to pay a monthly fee. And I just think the whole world is going to change, and particularly now where people are sort of saying, okay, I'm no longer doing a 5-day work week. I'm doing a 3-day work week, so maybe I don't need a car anymore.
Yeah.
So like, how about I trade my car in for I don't know, a like lifetime membership on this like mobility platform where, so it's a crazy time, right? Because like, it's a crazy time right now. So I think we're experiencing a bit of a revolution at the moment as it relates to mobility. And it's going to be very, I think we got to watch all the players. I think there's lots of potential out there. It's lots of smart people, plenty of not so smart people, but, people are going to, there's going to be someone's going to get really well funded and they're going to like knock it out of the park. And I think, it's our goal to have that role here in Florida and LA to Vegas and potentially other corridors. We want to be that player that facilitates the entire journey from end to end. Again, sorry, I'm not giving you the direct answer here. There's nobody that stands out for me per se that I can think of right now. I just think that my comment would be on the industry as a whole being a fascinating space to monitor right now.
Awesome. No, that was really, that was a really interesting answer. And especially, I think in the first podcast I did when we launched this, my boss, our agency president, talked about a thing that connects many modes of transportation. Like he mentioned something similar. So that rang a bell in my head when you said that. So yeah, that's really great.
Yeah.
Patrick, you know what? I would love to talk all day, but we got to let you go. Everybody, you can learn more about Brightline on their website at gobrightline.com and on all the usual social media platforms. Hopefully, I can't wait to see how you guys progress and when, you finish your Miami to Orlando. And this has been great. Thanks so much for your time and good luck with everything you're doing.
Thanks, John. Appreciate it. See you on board.
All right, everybody, if you enjoyed the show, please subscribe and leave us a review, whether you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you're watching or listening. It'll help us get the word out, and we'd really appreciate it. To learn more about HMH, the Transportation Transformation Agency, visit us at hmhagency.com or on all those usual social media platforms that I mentioned. For Patrick Goddard, I'm John Halpin. Thank you for listening, and we'll be back soon with a new episode of the Future of Transportation podcast.